They laughed at her in the courtroom that morning. They laughed when Daniel Carter called his wife useless. They laughed because she had no lawyer, no files, no power. But what they did not know was that in less than 15 minutes, the same courtroom would fall into complete silence. Daniel walked in wearing a perfectly tailored suit, confidence glowing on his face. He did not look at Emma as he took his seat, because in his mind she was already defeated. The reporters were ready. The audience was whispering everyone believed this divorce case would end quickly. Daniel requested permission to speak and began explaining how he built his empire from nothing, how he sacrificed sleep, how he carried every financial risk alone. He described Emma as someone who stayed at home enjoying luxury without understanding business. He said she had no degree, no corporate experience, no role in any major decision. The courtroom reacted with quiet amusement. Some people even nodded in agreement. Daniel leaned slightly forward and said, "She is asking for half of what I built, but she never built anything herself." He looked toward Emma with a confident smirk, expecting to see fear or regret, but her expression did not change. The judge observed, silently allowing Daniel to continue. He presented summaries of investments, contracts, and partnerships, all signed under his name, proving his authority. He made sure every document highlighted his leadership and his financial control. The atmosphere felt one-sided, as if the outcome was obvious. Emma finally spoke in a soft, steady voice, requesting permission to question her husband directly. Daniel almost laughed, believing she was making a mistake. The judge allowed it. Emma stepped forward slowly and asked Daniel if he remembered the first year of Carter Holdings when the company was only weeks away from bankruptcy. Daniel answered confidently, "Of course I remember, I saved it." She then asked how exactly he saved it. Daniel replied that a private investor stepped in at the last moment and believed in his vision. Emma looked directly at him and asked, "Who introduced you to that investor?" Daniel hesitated for the first time. His jaw tightened, and he said it happened naturally through business circles. Emma nodded slightly and returned to her place without saying anything further, but something invisible shifted in the courtroom. The earlier laughter had disappeared, and a quiet tension began to grow because for the first time, Daniel looked unsure and Emma looked like someone who knew much more than she was revealing. The tension in the courtroom grew as Emma requested permission to submit additional documents. Daniel crossed his arms, looking amused, thinking this was a desperate attempt to delay the outcome. The judge nodded, allowing her to proceed. Emma handed a sealed folder to the court clerk, who delivered it to the judge. He opened it carefully, scanning the pages, its expression becoming more serious with each second. Daniel shifted slightly in his seat. Emma then asked Daniel if he had ever opened offshore accounts. Daniel immediately said, "No, never." Emma calmly requested the judge to read page 3, allowed. The judge cleared his throat and read details of an offshore account opened 8 years ago under a holding company connected indirectly to Daniel's business. Daniel objected loudly, claiming irrelevance, but the judge raised his hand, signaling silence. Emma continued, asking Daniel if he remembered signing documents during a business trip when he was under pressure to secure funding. Daniel said yes, but that had nothing to do with her. Emma then revealed that the private investor who saved the company was not random. It was her college friend, who trusted her judgment, not his. Murmurs spread across the courtroom like electricity. Emma explained that she negotiated the initial terms secretly because Daniel had been too proud to accept help from her connections. She presented emails printed, clearly showing her communication with the investor, outlining strategy, risks, and projections, all written in her name. Daniel stared at the papers, his confidence slowly cracking. The judge looked directly at him and asked why these communications were never disclosed in previous filings. Daniel had no clear answer. Emma then revealed something heavier. She explained that the offshore account was created to move profits during a tax investigation and that she had discovered it years ago, but remained silent while gathering evidence. She presented bank transfer records linking Daniel personally to the hidden funds. The courtroom was completely silent. Now, no whispers, no laughter, only the sound of papers turning. Daniel attempted to speak, but his voice lacked its earlier strength. Emma looked at him not with anger, but with calm certainty and said, "You told everyone?" "I understood nothing, but I understood everything. The judge requested a short recess, but before leaving he warned Daniel that withholding financial information from the court could have serious consequences." Daniel sat down slowly, realizing the power had shifted. The audience no longer saw a helpless wife. They saw a woman who had waited patiently, collecting truth. Piece by piece, when the court resumed, the atmosphere felt heavier, more serious. Daniel avoided eye contact with reporters while Emma stood steady, waiting for the final phase. The judge began by summarizing the evidence, acknowledging that Emma had clearly demonstrated direct involvement in the company's survival and growth. He pointed out that financial concealment and failure to disclose assets could not be ignored. Daniel attempted one final defense, claiming stress, poor advice from accountants, misunderstanding, but his words felt weak compared to documented proof. The judge then delivered the ruling, stating that Emma was entitled not only to half of the visible assets, but also to a significant portion of the concealed offshore funds. Pending further investigation, gasps echoed through the courtroom. Daniel's face turned pale. The man who walked in smiling now looked defeated. The judge continued, explaining that separate legal proceedings might follow regarding financial misconduct. Emma closed her folder gently, her hands never shaking. She looked at Daniel not with hatred, but with calm certainty. The audience stared, amazed at how silently she had orchestrated the entire case with intelligence, patience, and strategy. Daniel could barely respond. He realized in that instant that the woman he thought powerless had been controlling the game from the start. The judge banged his gavel and ordered a recess. The courtroom emptied slowly, but everyone knew that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Emma walked out with quiet dignity. Daniel followed silently, burdened by his own arrogance and misjudgment. The whispers of the courtroom echoed in the halls about the woman who had turned humiliation into victory. Emma walked out of the courtroom with quiet dignity. The cameras flashed, but she paid no attention. She had proven her intelligence, her patience, and her strength. Daniel followed behind, silently, his confident smile gone, replaced by regret and disbelief. The public whispered about how the quiet wife had turned the tables without yelling, without tears, without desperation. Emma stepped into the sunlight, took a deep breath, and felt a sense of liberation. She had not only defended her rights, but had shown everyone that true strength often comes in silence. The courtroom would remember this day for years. The lesson: clear power and patience can overcome arrogance and pride. Daniel had underestimated her completely, and now the world knew that. Emma Carter was not just a wife, she was a strategist, a fighter, and a force to be reckoned with. The story ended, but the impact lingered in the minds of everyone who witnessed it. Forever. The media exploded with headlines. The very next morning, Emma Carter became the symbol of silent strength, while Daniel Carter became the example of arrogance exposed. But the story did not end at the courthouse. Financial investigators began reviewing the offshore accounts mentioned during the trial. Documents were reopened, frozen assets were examined, and former employees started coming forward with information that had been buried for years. Daniel tried to control the damage through public statements claiming misunderstanding, but the evidence was growing heavier each day. Emma remained quiet, refusing interviews, focusing instead on securing her legal rights and stabilizing the company shares that now partially belonged to her shareholders. Where nervous markets reacted and the board of directors scheduled an emergency meeting, whispers spread that Daniel might be removed as CEO for violating disclosure policies. During the internal review, more hidden transfers were discovered, linked to shell companies that traced back directly to him. The board realized the risk was not just financial, but reputational. Emma was invited to attend the meeting not as a wife, but as a major stakeholder. When she entered the corporate boardroom, the same confidence she carried in court returned. Directors who once ignored her, now listened carefully. She calmly presented a recovery strategy. Explaining transparency, restructuring, and ethical leadership, Daniel sat at the end of the table, silent. Watching the power he once controlled shift away from him vote after vote, the board decided to suspend Daniel, pending investigation, and appoint an interim executive to protect the company reputation, and for the first time in years, Daniel had no authority left. Weeks later, the official investigation concluded, confirming financial concealment and deliberate asset manipulation. Legal charges were formally filed, and Daniel faced not only professional collapse, but potential criminal consequences. The courtroom that once echoed with laughter now echoed with judgment, this time directed entirely at him. Emma attended the final hearing not for revenge, but for closure, the judge acknowledged her cooperation in uncovering the truth and emphasized that integrity within business and marriage cannot survive deception. Daniel attempted to speak, offering apologies, claiming pressure, ambition, fear of failure, but the words felt empty against documented proof. Sentencing included heavy financial penalties, disqualification from executive leadership, and ongoing criminal proceedings. As reporters surrounded the courthouse once again, Emma walked past them without triumph, in her expression only peace. She had not sought destruction, she had sought justice, and she achieved it. The company eventually stabilized under new leadership. Policies of transparency were implemented, and employees who once feared speaking up felt secure. Daniel's reputation faded from admiration to cautionary tale, and Emma quietly rebuilt her life, investing wisely, mentoring young entrepreneurs, and proving that intelligence, patience, and silence can be more powerful than noise. Arrogance and pride the woman once laughed at in court became the reason the system corrected itself, and the story that began with humiliation ended with accountability.